Hello and welcome again to Sacktown Talks. Today we have a special guest, Kipp Mueller, joining us from Southern California. Just ran for Senate District 21. Kipp, how's it going? Thanks for joining the program.
I'm great. Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk with you.
For the listeners who don't know, can you give us a little background on yourself and kind of a little bit about your recent election?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Sacramento and in Lamb Park area. My dad was a house painter, so I grew up on rooftops painting houses in an apartment complex around Sacramento. Was doing that from a very young age, which I've since learned was in violation of various labor code provisions, but that's all right. And my mom was a community college counselor for students with disabilities for 38 years at American River College. Just retired last year. So, the short version of this is I went to McClatchy in Sacramento. I went to Berkeley and then Columbia Law. From a young age, my dad suffered from various health ailments, and my mom had a union job through the community college that allowed us to have healthcare coverage. And we had good coverage. And because of that, my dad was able to be taken care of throughout my childhood. And I always wanted to fight for working families and for labor unions, and saw that the merit in having labor unions and having a robust labor union system. So I went to Columbia Law. I studied comparative labor law and learned about labor law in other countries and what could be done here. I joined President Obama's Department of Justice in 2014 and worked in the consumer protection branch there. Long story short, eventually joined and then started a civil rights firm, which is what I do today. I'm a workers' rights attorney and a pro bono asylum attorney as well here in Santa Clarita.
Okay, interesting. And kind of, I guess, what propelled you to run for Senate District 21, and kind of, can you tell us a little bit about your race and how you did?
Sure. How I ended up running was really happenstance. I wasn't really thinking, I'm 33 years old. I need to run for state Senate. I was actually part of the movement taking place here in Northern LA County in 2018. When people from LA were coming up to CA 25 to flip the seat from red to blue for the first time ever, I had an organization that was helping assist with that. And we had tremendous success. We won the seat by 9 points in 2018.
Wow.
And so I had this organization. I was looking for who's running for office up here for other seats, and just thought, why is this state Senate seat red, and who's going to fight for the state Senate seat? And we were actually looking as an organization to support somebody else. And I was asking around a lot, trying to see who we could help get there. And there was just nobody interested in running. And finally, the people I was asking, community leaders, started saying, you keep asking everybody, why don't you just do it? And which I thought was pretty crazy at first. And I had conversations with family, friends, and local in the community and local leaders, and decided to do it. We had put together a really strong campaign. And came really close. As one of the closest races in all of California, federal or state level, against the now Senate Minority Leader, Scott Wilk. And we put in the work, and we had a great team. So I'm proud of what we accomplished there.
Yeah. For I guess the listeners who don't know, I guess, how close were you?
About 6,000 votes. So
Wow.
It was 50 point something to 49 point something. I mean, it was really, I was up, not sleeping very well for several weeks, watching ballots come in. We were watching LA County every day, had a new drop of ballots, and I would maybe take the lead and then lose the lead. And it was it was tough,
Right.
but it was one of those that we found out in late November. We had to wait several weeks for the mail-in ballots to determine whether we won or lost.
Right. The excruciating wait.
Yeah.
That has always been kind of a very conservative Republican area. Kind of, I guess what was the voter registration leading in to the race, and kind of, what were your expectations going into this?
Voter registration, we had about an 8% lead, Democrats,
Okay,
and it was
wow.
just a function of getting folks to turn out. And that was tough in the year of COVID to actually make that happen. We did the best we could, but it's an interesting seat. In 2012, I think the Republican candidate won by about 15 points. In 2016, by about 5, and then in my race, a little over 1. So it's a region that's very quickly moving blue, and I think that soon enough it will actually it looks like the trend is such that it'll be a pretty light to solid blue region in a matter of years, or perhaps a decade.
Yeah. Now that you kind of had, 6, 7 months to kind of, I guess, reflect on this and have a little time, are you getting the bug to run again, to run for something else, or kind of what's your political future look like, in your mind at this time?
No, I mean, I'm not closing the door to the idea of running again, but not having to make calls all day, begging people for money is
Right.
really nice. Just being a normal human who can just work a job and live my life again, and not be in a sort of spotlight has been really refreshing. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm staying engaged with the community and the local politics, but really to help folks who are looking to run in any way I can. And
Yeah.
this is extended to anybody out there who's watching. If you haven't run for office before, especially, I'd love to be a resource, having gone through it. And so that's I'm staying engaged locally. I'm practicing law again, and I have some great cases I'm working on that I'm really proud of. I'm representing asylum seekers at the ICE detention center, and then involved in local stuff that's going on here in northern LA County. So I don't know, I'm taking a break in that sense from it all,
Right.
and I'm not dreaming of running again. And I really didn't run in the first place because I was like itching, like I have to run for office right now. It all things aligned in a way that was really serendipitous, and I'm not one to just feel like, well, it's 2 years later and there's another election cycle, I guess I have to run again, is really not my
Right.
mentality. Yeah.
Earlier, I thought this was interesting. You talked about kind of your background in labor law and kind of your interest in labor law. This past November and the past couple of years here up in the legislature, we've had, fascinating conversations and laws passed, reflecting the change in labor and, tech coming in and, independent contractors and the like, kind of with, the passage of Prop 22 and kind of rolling back and defining certain characteristics of labor and independent contractors. Kind of, what is your thoughts on how we can marry, this world of the future with technology and kind of our old, labor laws to, ensure that, everyone has, a fair chance in getting what they need?
It's a great question. And first off, I'm very concerned that we already have a widening income gap without all of this technology that's coming, especially automated cars, things like that. And we have to answer the question when it comes to the gig economy and jobs in the gig economy, and when it comes to the jobs lost to automation, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
How are we going to make sure that if you're employed in the gig economy full time, can you retire? How does that work? Because if the gig economy is going to be the primary source of jobs in the coming decades, we have to make sure that people can live that life and then retire, right? And save enough to raise a family. Otherwise, we all lose. And that's what I really impress upon people, is that none of us stand to gain from a system in which the working and middle class is not set up for prosperity. It's a lose-lose for everyone who lives in this society, whether you're rich or poor or working class, obviously. So I'm concerned about that. The other thing that's ironic to me is seemingly development of all this technology should make life better for humans. Like,
Right.
We're going to have drones and things. And like, you would think that if you set up the right system, all of us should stand to gain from this new way of living where we can automate most of the things that we need in our daily lives. The problem is that the prosperity generated from that automation is so concentrated to so few people. So I'm concerned about that. I mean, I'm excited about the technologies that are coming if they're handled the right way, and if we make sure that people can continue to have the dignity of work and retire with dignity. But if we don't ensure that from the front, from the get-go now, I fear that the income gap will only be exacerbated, and we could face a really scary future in terms of how common working families can get by. So.
Yeah, it's kind of like looking through history. There's always these periods of time where new technology comes in and, workers are exploited, and then, protection laws come in and we advance. And, kind of the Industrial Revolution comes to mind, people working in sweatshops and sewing machines and, making clothing. And then, protections came in and we've advanced. I guess what sort of protections need to come into place to kind of protect people in this gig economy?
Well, I mean, So as an example, if you're right now, there's a lot of people who drive, Uber or Lyft full time. The concern is my concern is that the person, many people who are doing that are worried about the next month's bills, and they know that their car is dilapidating. They know they're not saving any money for the long haul, that they can't. It's not
Right.
an income you can do that on, but it's just enough to make the bills. So you have a company that's really in a position to take advantage of the fact that a lot of people need that short-term income, even though they're giving up any chance of long-term prosperity or building wealth or stability. Um, so, the answer is not easy to that question, of course, and it has to do with a lot of legislation, but also creating incentives and giving companies the incentive to take care of their workers, making sure that the gig economy has the proper, whether it's tax incentives or otherwise, or it's regulations. You can use a carrot and a stick, right,
Mhm.
to make sure that that the people that they're employing, if they're going to be doing this long term, they're going to be able to get by and save some money. But it's not there's no, if I had a magic wand with a single policy answer for you, I'd provide it. But I think it's going to
Right.
be a learning process. I also think we're going to learn as we go, as this economy continues to build, what needs to be done. This is a first for humans to have this level of automation and gig economy growth. So
Right.
we
You know,
adapt and build as we go.
I guess part of the legislature's solution to this problem was AB5, which has been met with a lot of criticism from different industries, where people have functioned as independent contractors typically, and it kind of really disrupted, I guess, their business model. Kind of what are your thoughts on AB5 and its implementation? And I guess what would you do to kind of help round it into shape a little more? What would you suggest?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it was a response to the Dynamex California Supreme Court decision, and I think the legislature's done the right thing in listening to industries. I think it needs to be approached with a scalpel as opposed to swinging a hammer. And the question I would ask is, I'd go to industry leaders and workers and unions in certain industries and ask, which type of classification do you prefer? And there are some industries where the workers are saying, I don't want to be an employee. Please
Right.
don't make me an employee. So in those cases, I don't know who we're protecting, right? Because the companies don't want it and the workers are saying they don't want it. We're not protecting anyone by changing that. But then there's other industries where people are really exploited and taken advantage of. Um, and those protections are desperately needed. Actually, I just saw, this is random, but was just watching John Oliver recently, and he had a segment about WWE and the wrestlers and the fact that they don't have any retirement setup or workers comp or protections, and they die 20 to 30 years younger than most the average person,
Right.
because and a lot of that you can attribute to lack of labor code protection. So it's industry specific. It's talking to workers and the industry and figuring out what works best. But I think that I think the legislature is doing the right thing by feeling out based on industry where this makes sense and where it doesn't. And I think it's, again, one of those things we're learning as we go, and some sort of hybrid model and thinking about how we approach that typical dichotomy of employer versus independent contractor, making it work for everybody, I think requires a scalpel. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You spent the last, a year to 18 months, running for this seat, meeting, I'm sure thousands of people in the district. I guess, how has that experience of running and kind of meeting people, talking to people, exposing you to different areas? I guess, how has that changed, I guess, your work as an attorney and kind of what you're working on now?
That's a great question. Yeah. I mean, first off, it's one of the most exhilarating, amazing things I've ever done in my life. And unfortunately, obviously, during COVID, we just weren't able to do as much of that. But during the primary, I had a chance to be in living rooms and at events. And it was it's just wonderful. It's also hard hitting in the sense that you hear a lot of tough stories. You hear a lot of people really going through terrible situations. And you hear a lot about failures of our system, and you think about kind of what kind of changes. I mean, I learned a lot about sort of failures of our healthcare system in particular. One story of a kid who was under 18 who was taken to an urgent care because he had COVID symptoms, and they said, you're not insured. You need to go find somewhere else to go, and passed away in the car on the way to another hospital. Just a system failure. He's a child, has nothing to do with the system we created. Went to a place that had opportunity to treat him. It didn't. System failed. So you think a lot about that. And in terms of my work, I mean, I'm engaged in, I've learned a lot about, and I'm now working with leaders in the Antelope Valley, dealing with, there's criminal justice issues in the Black Lives Matter movement that really took off in the Antelope Valley and has been tremendously successful at galvanizing people. And I've been assisting with, as a civil rights attorney, with sort of the legal process of what's happening. The Department of Justice actually sued the local sheriffs in the Antelope Valley, and I'm assisting folks with that. I'm engaging with various organizations and offering pro bono assistance for those organizations that I think are doing a wonderful job for people. I would have known of those organizations if I hadn't run. So it's allowed me to get to know folks in the community and be a part of what's happening and bring the change that people are seeking. So that's been a blessing.
Earlier you were talking about running, and we asked you if you'd do it again, and you were talking about, what a relief it was not, having to call people and ask them for money.
Yes.
Out of that, do you have any really good bad stories of things that happened to you while you were campaigning? Like I remember, going door to door and getting yelled at by people. Do you have any kind of like funny bad experiences that happened to you while you were running?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. I mean, definitely got fair share of Facebook messages or calls, cussing me out or whatever, but you get kind of used to that.
Right.
And, same thing with calling people asking for money. I had a funny circumstance, and I was actually able to tell the now Vice President, Kamala Harris, the story. I had somebody ask me if people, you meet people day to day and they're not familiar with what state Senate is, certainly not familiar with the size of the district and the scope of the effort to try to win a state Senate seat is it's something to really take on. But I would sometimes people asked if I was running against Kamala Harris since she was the U.S. Senator at the time, which was pretty funny. I was like, absolutely not. No, God, no. No, I mean, honestly, I had some sad stories. I had one thing that stuck out with me that I told this story all the time when I was campaigning, but I had a middle school student come up to me at a parade and asked if I talk about environmental issues when I campaign. I said, sure. And she said, well, I hope you really are bold about climate change, because by the time I'm old enough to run for office, it'll already be determined whether or not we're on a path to survive climate change or not. I don't get to be a candidate who runs for office, wins, and gets to make policy changes. Like, you have to do it now.
Right.
Which really stuck with me and still makes me emotional to think about. And then, stories that I can't tell publicly of just people going through horrible things with their families that I've tried to help out. But yeah.
And I guess now to like turn the question on its head, I guess what was the best experience you experienced kind of while running, kind of the most memorable?
Yeah. I would say, honestly, I think it was probably the Black Lives Matter movement in the Antelope Valley and attending events and being supportive where I could, but the energy. So, we'd gone from our primary and we had success in the primary, and then COVID struck, and we didn't know what to do. And it sort of felt a little bit of disarray in terms of how do you campaign during COVID? This was all new. And the Black Lives Matter movement picked up, and it brought just this wave of tremendous energy to anyone involved politically in this area or whatever else. The passion and energy that it brought was so electrifying and needed. And I was just so inspired by what happened here. And that was a really powerful thing to be a part of and witness. Yeah.
In the media, they always portray, when a race is over, is there any communication between you and the opponent? Did you and Senator Wilk ever talk or concede or have a conversation after the race was over?
Yeah, we did, and it was very cordial, and I was happy about that. At times, our campaign and it did become a little bit. There was some negative stuff that I would say both sides did to some degree, and you try to distinguish yourself from your opponent, and sometimes that comes across negative too. And we had a wonderful conversation. What was funny was he created this song about me that was on the radio locally, and it was very catchy. And I actually was able to get a hold of it, and like at the time sent it to family and friends, just cracking up. So it's so funny. It wasn't true. It was about how I was going to decimate Prop 13, which wasn't true, and all this other stuff.
Right.
Whatever. It's a political, ad. But it was, and I told him that. I said, I gotta hand it to you. That was really catchy. But the thing was, everybody knew the song, and people, a lot of people learned my name from it. And I told him, I don't know if it worked totally against me. We were like, so many people knew my name, and he's like, yeah, well, maybe, I don't know. So we had a really friendly. No, he's a really nice guy, and I never said when I was campaigning or running for office that I'm running against him because I have anything personal against him. He's a nice guy.
Right. What was the song like keyed to, or was it similar to something we'd know?
It kind of sounded like Randy Newman. That's what made it so catchy. It had that like Randy Newman kind of piano.
Right.
I actually don't even remember right in this moment the melody of it, but it just had this like that Randy Newman style like catchiness to it. Yeah,
that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
And then kind of, I guess to catch us up to where so the listeners know kind of what are you working on now, and kind of where's your career taken to you now, and kind of what are you up to?
I am I primarily represent workers. I do discrimination, retaliation, harassment lawsuits representing workers. I also represent workers who are injured or killed at work. I have cases against some big companies right now representing individuals. I have a big race discrimination case I'm working on. And then the asylum cases that I have. Between those two things, they're occupying really a lot of my time at the moment. I'm also sort of keeping an ear to the ground because maps are being drawn right now, which is a really important thing happening, and our region has to pay attention to that in particular. And I'm also talking to potential candidates who are looking to run for office around here, and sort of hearing out, feeling out who has a chance to win and who I like, and seeing what I can do to help. So, like I said, in 2018, I wasn't running for office. I was just here because I saw Northern LA County had tremendous potential for Democrats, and I 100% still see it that way. And I'm still just looking to offer what I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Mr. Speaker's looking for somebody to run for assembly up there. So
yeah, and I've talked to there's some great people who are looking to run for the seat. So we're feeling it out as we go. But all these seats should be at the very least extremely competitive on our part. And I think that we're now really focused in this region as Democrats. And like I said, I don't think this area stays red for very long. I think it's a question of when rather than if it flips blue and stays blue.
Yeah, interesting. If some of our listeners kind of want to follow what you're doing online or social media, kind of how can they find you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Kipp Mueller, so Kipp, last name Mueller. And if this is a video you can see here. And on Facebook, I'm most active on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter as well, but most active on Facebook, and would love to chat. And sincerely, anyone out there who's looking to run, if you're a younger candidate, if it's your first time, if you don't feel like you're entrenched or all the people in politics and that scares you, I'm more than happy to talk to you, tell you about my experience, and offer whatever help I can. So please feel free to reach out.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kipp, and enjoy your day. Thanks for joining us.
All right, you too. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Some are called dreamers.